A black single father walked into his own hotel just before midnight, gray hoodie-worn jeans, his 8-year-old daughter asleep on his shoulder, one small hand still wrapped around a stuffed bear. He asked for a room. The front desk clerk looked him over once, then leaned forward and said, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "Sir, this isn't the kind of place you can just walk into." 3 minutes later, that same clerk handed 2 key cards to a well-dressed couple who hadn't even made a reservation. When the father asked to speak with the manager, he was publicly humiliated and escorted toward the exit in a lobby full of witnesses who had no idea the man being thrown out owned every inch of it. Before the night was over, someone would be fired on the spot. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong somewhere, this one's for you. Stay with us. Marcus Johnson had not planned to stop here tonight. 3 months abroad had a way of making a man crave the simplest things: a hot shower, a real bed, and the sound of his daughter breathing steadily beside him. His flight had landed 2 hours behind schedule, and by the time they cleared baggage claim, it was nearly midnight. Driving another 40 minutes to their house in that condition felt reckless, so he made the decision quickly, the way he made most decisions, without ceremony and without announcing it to anyone. He knew exactly where they were going. The Grand Meridian on 5th, the flagship property of Johnson Hospitality Group, the hotel that had taken him 11 years to build from a single underperforming property in Charlotte into what it was now. He had opened this location himself, cut the ribbon himself, stood on that marble floor, and told his team that this place would represent everything he believed about how people deserve to be treated. He had not been back in 4 months, and he had not called ahead. That was intentional. Marcus had a habit of visiting his properties unannounced, dressed the way he was dressed now: gray hoodie, dark jeans, plain sneakers, no watch, no luggage that announced wealth. It was the only honest way to see what was actually happening inside his buildings when no one was performing for the boss. His father had spent 22 years working the night security shift at a hotel very much like this one, and something he said once had never left Marcus: that the way a place treats the people it thinks don't matter tells you everything you need to know about it. Not the people it's trying to impress, the people it thinks it can afford to ignore. Zoe had fallen asleep somewhere over the Atlantic and had not fully woken since. She was 8 years old and weighed almost nothing, but after 3 months apart, Marcus would have carried her twice the distance without complaint. She had her mother's eyelashes and her father's stubbornness, and she was currently using his left shoulder as a pillow, her small arms loosely wrapped around his neck, a worn stuffed bear named Captain tucked under her chin. Marcus held her with one arm and pushed through the revolving door with the other. The lobby of the Grand Meridian was exactly as he remembered it: warm light falling across Italian marble, the faint sound of jazz from somewhere near the bar, a long front desk of dark mahogany staffed at this hour by a single clerk. The space was designed to make people feel immediately at ease, immediately welcome. Marcus had signed off on every detail of that design himself. He crossed the floor, slowly mindful of Zoe's weight, and approached the desk. The clerk was a young man in his late 20s, well-groomed, wearing the hotel's navy uniform with the kind of careful precision that suggested he took appearance very seriously. His name tag read Derek. He looked up from his screen when Marcus approached, and something shifted in his expression, not dramatically. Not rudely, just a quiet recalibration. The way a person's face changes when their eyes deliver information their brain has already processed. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the sleeping child. He looked back at his screen. "Good evening," Marcus said. "I need a room for tonight. 1 night, 2 guests. Doesn't need to be anything special." Derek's eyes stayed on his screen for a moment longer than necessary before he looked up again. Then he leaned forward slightly, just enough, and said in a voice pitched carefully for the people nearby, "Sir, this isn't the kind of place you can just walk into." The words landed in the space between them with a particular kind of weight, not shouted, Not aggressive, just quiet and certain, the way people say things when they want the humiliation to feel inevitable rather than personal. A woman at the lounge bar 2 tables away glanced over. Marcus did not look at her. He kept his eyes on Derek and said evenly, "I'm asking for a room. That's all." Derek straightened. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked tonight. No availability." Marcus did not react. He simply asked, "Nothing at all. I'm not looking for a suite. A standard room is fine. We just need somewhere to sleep." Derek repeated himself with the smooth, practiced patience of someone who had delivered this particular line many times. "Fully booked, sir. I apologize for the inconvenience. There are several other hotels in the area that may be able to accommodate you." Marcus stood at that counter and said nothing for a moment. He looked at Derek's face not with anger, but with the careful attention of a man cataloging what he was seeing. Then, not 3 minutes later, the front door opened behind him. A couple walked in. The man was in a blazer. The woman wore a coat that cost more than most people's rent. They moved like people who expected rooms to be available for them, because in their experience, rooms always were. Derek's entire posture changed. His shoulders lifted. His smile arrived fast and genuine. "Welcome to the Grand Meridian," Derek said. "Do you have a reservation with us this evening?" The couple did not. They were in fact walk-ins exactly as Marcus was. But within 4 minutes, Derek had confirmed a room, processed a card, and handed over 2 key cards with a warmth that filled the whole counter. Marcus watched every second of it. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The message had been delivered without a single word, and both men in that transaction understood it perfectly, even if only one of them was willing to admit it. Zoe stirred against his shoulder. Her voice came out soft and half-conscious, muffled against the fabric of his hoodie. "Daddy, are we at the hotel yet?" Marcus tightened his arm around her. "We're here, baby. Just give me a minute." He turned back to the desk. His voice was calm, the way very still water is calm, not because nothing is happening beneath it, but because whatever is happening has not yet decided to surface. "I'd like to speak with your manager on duty, please." Derek's expression shifted again, this time into something less smooth, a flicker of something he covered quickly. He picked up the desk phone and made a short call. Marcus waited. He looked around the lobby at the people sitting in the lounge chairs at the concierge desk, where a young woman was pretending to organize paperwork while clearly tracking the situation at the soft light and the marble, and the jazz still playing from somewhere near the bar. He had built this place to feel like a sanctuary. He wondered not for the first time what happened to things you built once you handed them to other people to run. The manager arrived within 2 minutes. His name tag read Richard, and he was in his mid-40s, the kind of man who wore a suit at midnight, because authority in his understanding was something you maintained through surfaces. He had clearly been briefed before he reached the desk because he did not come to the situation with an open mind. He came to it with a conclusion already drawn. "Sir," Richard said, positioning himself beside Derek in a way that made the geometry of the situation obvious, 2 of them on one side, Marcus on the other, Zoe asleep on his shoulder. "I understand there's been some confusion. My staff has already explained that we don't have availability tonight. I'm afraid there's nothing further I can do for you." "There's no confusion," Marcus said. "I watched your staff book a room for a walk-in couple while telling me there was nothing available. I'm asking you to explain that." Richard's expression hardened slightly, the way a position hardens when challenged by someone it has already decided to dismiss. "Our staff exercised their professional judgment. I stand behind that." Marcus looked at him steadily. "Your professional judgment." "That's correct." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. He thought about his father, about the 22 years of night shifts, the uniforms worn through at the elbows, the way his father used to come home and sit at the kitchen table without talking for a while before he could become himself again. His father had never been angry about it, not really, just tired in a particular way that Marcus had understood even as a child. What his father had given him wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. And standing here now in the lobby of his own flagship hotel holding his sleeping daughter, Marcus felt that clarity settle over him like something solid. He was not going to reveal himself. Not yet. He needed to see how far this went, not for his own satisfaction, but because if this was happening here at the property that was supposed to set the standard for everything else in his portfolio, then he needed to understand the full shape of it before he did anything about it. "I'd like your full name and your exact title," Marcus said. For the record, Richard provided both without warmth. Marcus noted them the way he noted everything quietly, completely, without making a show of it. Then he stepped back from the desk and found a seat in the lobby, settling Zoe against him, and waited to see what came next. He was not finished here, he was just beginning. He did not have to wait long. Richard had not gone back to wherever managers went at midnight. He had stationed himself near the front desk, arms crossed, watching Marcus the way a man watches something he has decided is a problem, but hasn't yet figured out how to remove. Every few minutes, his eyes moved across the lobby to where Marcus sat with Zoe still sleeping against his shoulder, and each time his expression carried the same message: "You are still here, and I would prefer that you weren't." Marcus noticed. He noticed the way Richard whispered something to Derek that made the younger man straighten his spine. He noticed the young woman at the concierge desk, her name tag read Maya, keeping her eyes carefully on her desk, while her hands had stopped moving entirely. He noticed two guests at the lounge bar who had grown quieter in the last several minutes, their attention drifting in his direction without fully committing to it. The lobby had developed a particular kind of tension, the kind that forms when people sense something is wrong but are waiting for someone else to name it first. Marcus had seen this before. Not here, not in his own building, but in enough rooms over the course of his life to recognize the shape of it immediately. It was the tension of people who knew something unfair was happening and had decided, each for their own reasons, that it was not their place to say so. He shifted Zoe, gently adjusting her weight against his arm, and kept watching. Richard eventually made his move. He crossed the lobby with the measured stride of someone performing authority rather than exercising. It stopped a few feet from where Marcus was seated and spoke in the kind of lowered voice that is designed to sound discreet while still being heard by the people nearby. "Sir, I've given you some time, and I want to be straightforward with you. This is a private establishment. We've explained that we can't accommodate you tonight, and continuing to occupy the lobby after being informed of that is not something we're going to allow." Marcus looked up at him. "I'm sitting in a chair in a hotel lobby. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't caused any disruption, and I haven't done anything that would give you grounds to ask me to leave." "I'm not asking," Richard said. Something in the room shifted. One of the guests at the bar set down their glass. Maya's head came up slightly and then dropped again. Marcus looked at Richard's face, at the certainty there, the complete and undisturbed confidence of a man who had never once considered that he might be wrong, and felt something settle in his own chest. Not anger, something older and more deliberate than anger. "Then I'd like you to call security," Marcus said. "I want this to be official." Richard's jaw tightened. He turned and gave a short nod toward the far end of the lobby where two security guards had apparently been waiting for exactly this signal. They were both large men moving with the patient heaviness of people who do this regularly, and they positioned themselves on either side of Marcus's chair with the practiced ease of a maneuver they had performed many times before. It was at this exact moment that Zoe woke up. She came back to consciousness the way children do, not gradually, but all at once, blinking into the light with complete alertness, taking in the lobby, the guards, the tension in her father's body, and Richard's expression in a single sweep. She sat up straighter against Marcus's arm, clutching Captain the Bear to her chest, and looked at the two large men standing beside her with the frank, unguarded curiosity of someone who has not yet learned to pretend she doesn't see what she sees. Then she looked at Richard directly. "Why are you making us leave?" she asked. Her voice was clear and unhurried, carrying the particular quality that children's voices have in quiet spaces. It went further than she intended, reaching the guests at the bar, the couple near the elevator, Maya at the concierge desk. Richard did not answer her. He looked at Marcus instead, which was its own kind of answer. Zoe looked at her father, then back at Richard, working through it with the methodical patience of an 8-year-old who takes questions seriously. "If they don't want us here," she said, "why do they work here? Isn't their job to help people?" The question had no accusation in it. It was entirely sincere, the kind of question a child asks when the behavior of adults simply does not add up. But sincere questions asked clearly in quiet rooms have a way of landing harder than anything rehearsed. The couple near the elevator had both turned now. The guests at the bar were no longer pretending to look elsewhere. Even one of the security guards, the one on Marcus's left, had shifted his weight in a way that suggested something in him was uncomfortable with where he was standing. Maya had gone completely still at the concierge desk, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere on the surface in front of her, her hands flat against the counter. Marcus looked down at his daughter. He kept his voice level and warm the way he always did when he wanted her to understand that the world's disorder was not her fault. "You didn't do anything wrong, Zoe. Not one thing." He held her gaze until she nodded, and then he straightened and looked back at Richard. Richard's face had changed. The certainty was still there, but something underneath it had cracked slightly, not from doubt, but from irritation. The question had drawn attention he hadn't wanted, had shifted the dynamic in the room in a way he couldn't immediately correct, and his response to that was to push harder. Some men, when they feel control slipping, tighten their grip. Richard was that kind of man. "This has gone on long enough," Richard said, his voice dropping all pretense of hospitality. He looked at the guards. "Please escort them out." The guard on the left moved forward. The one on the right followed. Marcus stood slowly, careful with Zoe keeping her close against his side. He did not resist. He did not raise his voice. But he did not move toward the door either, not yet. He stood in the center of the lobby with his daughter beside him and looked at Richard with the expression of a man who has seen everything he came to see and is now deciding what to do with it. Several phones had appeared in the room. Not conspicuously, people were not holding them up, not making a production of it, but they were there angled in his direction, recording the specific geography of this moment. A black man in a gray hoodie, his 8-year-old daughter holding a stuffed bear, 2 security guards, and a manager whose face said he had already decided how this ended. Marcus reached into the pocket of his hoodie and took out his phone. He found the number he was looking for, pressed call, and brought the phone to his ear. The call lasted less than a minute. He said 4 sentences, listened for 10 seconds, and ended the call. Then he put the phone back in his pocket and stood quietly, his hand resting on Zoe's shoulder. "Daddy," Zoe said quietly just for him, "do we have to go?" Marcus looked down at her. "Not tonight," he said. "We're not going anywhere tonight." Richard heard this and took a step forward, his patience fully exhausted. "Sir, I am telling you for the last time." The elevator chimed. It was a small sound, the kind the lobby produced dozens of times a night without anyone noticing. But every person in that room noticed this one. The doors opened, and Thomas Webb stepped out, the CEO of Johnson Hospitality Group, silver-haired, wearing a dark suit that he had clearly not had time to fully straighten before coming downstairs. Beside him were 2 other men from the executive team, both moving with the barely contained urgency of people who understand the precise weight of what they are walking into. Thomas crossed the lobby floor directly to Marcus. He did not look at Richard. He did not look at Derek. He looked at Marcus the way a man looks at someone he has just realized he has failed, and he stopped in front of him and said with a formality that carried genuine weight, "Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry you were kept waiting." The lobby went silent, not dramatically the way rooms do in films, but the way rooms do in real life, one sound at a time, until nothing was left but the faint jazz from the bar, which seemed suddenly and completely wrong for the occasion. Thomas turned to face the front desk. His voice was even, which somehow made it worse than if he had shouted. "This is Marcus Johnson. He is the founder and sole owner of Johnson Hospitality Group." He owns this hotel. He owns the chairs you're standing next to, the uniforms you're wearing, and the contracts that determine whether you work here tomorrow. Thomas let that sit for exactly one breath. I want everyone in this room to be very clear about what happened here tonight. Derek had gone the color of the marble counter. Richard had not moved, standing in the center of the lobby, with the particular stillness of a man whose understanding of the situation has just been completely restructured, and who has not yet worked out what to do inside the new version of it. Zoe looked up at Thomas, then at her father, then back at Thomas. She pulled Captain a little tighter and leaned into Marcus's side. "Daddy," she whispered, "you know this man." Marcus looked down at her, and for the first time since they had walked through those revolving doors, something in his face softened entirely. He put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Yeah, baby," he said. "I know this man." Nobody moved. That was the thing Marcus noticed most in the seconds after Thomas finished speaking, the complete absence of motion in a room that had just minutes ago been building towards something loud and certain. Richard was still standing in the middle of the lobby floor. Derek had both hands flat on the mahogany counter, as if he needed it to hold him upright. The two security guards had stepped back without being told to, instinctively creating distance from a situation that had just fundamentally changed shape. Even the guests who had been recording on their phones had lowered them, slightly caught between the instinct to document and the sense that what was happening now required something more than a screen between them and it. Marcus looked at the room. He looked at each face in turn, not with triumph, not with the satisfaction of a man who has won something, but with the particular attention of someone taking inventory. He was not thinking about what he wanted to say. He was thinking about what this moment actually was and what it required of him. Richard found his voice first, which was either brave or foolish, and in this case was probably both. "Mr. Johnson, I want to explain we had no way of knowing the circumstances weren't—" Each sentence started with confidence and ran out of it before reaching a period. He was not lying exactly. He genuinely had not known who Marcus was. But Marcus had spent enough time in enough rooms to understand that not knowing is not the same as not being responsible. And Richard understood that too somewhere underneath the scrambling, which was why none of his sentences could find their endings. Marcus let him finish. He did not interrupt, did not shift his expression, did not give Richard anything to push against or cling to. He simply listened until the words stopped coming, and then he spoke. "You're right," Marcus said. "You didn't know who I was. That's actually the whole point." His voice carried across the lobby without effort, not because he raised it, but because everything else had gone so quiet. "Everything you did tonight, you did it because you looked at me and decided I wasn't worth the standard. Not because of anything I said or did, because of what I looked like when I walked through that door. And you did it in front of my daughter." Richard opened his mouth. Marcus continued, his voice still level, still unhurried. "My father worked security in a hotel like this one for 22 years. He came home every night carrying something that never fully left him the weight of being dismissed by people who decided before he opened his mouth that he didn't matter. I built this company because I believed that didn't have to be the way things work. That the person standing at your front desk deserves dignity before they've proven a single thing to you. Not after you've checked their clothes or decided they look like they belong. Before." Marcus looked at Thomas, who gave a short nod, and then looked back at Richard. "You didn't just fail a customer tonight. You failed everyone who has ever walked through a door like this one and been made to feel like they didn't belong. And you did it in front of my daughter." Richard attempted one more sentence. It didn't make it far. "Richard," Marcus said quietly, "you're terminated effective immediately." He looked at Thomas, who stepped aside to make the call. Richard's face settled into something gray and inward. Whatever argument he still had in him, he chose not to use it. He straightened his jacket once, the small automatic gesture of a man trying to preserve the last intact piece of his dignity, and walked toward the back office without another word. Derek was next, and Marcus crossed to the front desk, slowly giving the younger man time to understand what was coming. Derek looked like he hadn't taken a full breath in several minutes, his jaw tight, his eyes carrying the particular shine of someone working hard to hold themselves together. Marcus stopped at the counter and looked at him directly. "You made a choice tonight based on how someone looked. I want you to sit with that, not with what it cost you professionally, but with what it means. What it actually feels like to be on the other side of it." Marcus kept his voice even, not unkind. "I'm not ending your career here. But you're going into a full retraining program, not skill-based, values-based. You're going to spend real time understanding what this work is and who it's for. If you come out the other side and still want to be here, the door is open. But tonight cannot happen again. Not to anyone." Derek nodded. It was a small movement, but it was real. Marcus turned and walked to the concierge desk where Maya had been standing motionless through all of it, her hands flat on the counter, her expression carrying the particular tension of someone waiting to find out whether they are in trouble for something they didn't do. He stopped in front of her and kept his voice quiet enough that it was only for her. "You saw it," he said. "You knew something was wrong and you couldn't say anything. I understand why the structure here made that very hard, and that's a failure of leadership, not of character." Maya opened her mouth slightly, and Marcus continued before she could apologize. "But I watched you tonight. The way you tracked what was happening, the way something in you recognized where the line was even when you couldn't cross it, that matters. Starting tomorrow, you're moving into a supervisory role in guest services, because I need people in positions where they can actually act on what they know is right." Maya looked at him for a moment with an expression that moved through several things before settling into something that lived between relief and resolve. "I won't let you down," she said. "I know," Marcus said simply. He turned back to face the room. The guests who remained were watching him openly now, no pretense. No phones held up, just people waiting to hear what came next. Marcus spoke without preamble, the way he had learned to speak, when what he needed to say was the kind of thing that didn't improve with decoration. "I've been building hotels for a long time, and the only standard I have never been willing to negotiate on is this one: every person who walks through our doors gets treated with respect. Not based on what they're wearing, not based on what they look like, not based on whether they seem like they belong in a place like this. Every person, every time, without exception. That is what this company is." He looked around the room one last time, at the desk at the bar, at the marble floor his father had never been allowed to walk across as anything other than an employee. "If anyone here cannot commit to that standard, I would genuinely rather you find somewhere else to work, not as a threat, just as the truth of what we are." The room held the words for a moment. And then Zoe, who had been standing beside her father through all of it with Captain tucked under her arm, and the serious, focused expression of an 8-year-old determined to understand the world correctly, looked up and tugged once on his hand. "Daddy," she said, "can we get our room now? I'm really tired." It moved through the room like something released, not quite laughter, but something adjacent to it, the kind of sound a group of people makes when tension finally finds somewhere to go. Even Thomas pressed his lips together against a smile. Marcus looked down at his daughter, at her earnest face and her worn, stuffed bear, and her absolute, uncomplicated sincerity, and felt the thing that had been sitting in his chest all evening finally shift. Not disappear, just move into something that had more room in it. "Yeah, baby," he said. "We're getting our room." 3 months later, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a family came through the revolving doors of the Grand Meridian. 2 parents, travel-worn, dressed for comfort rather than impressions, with 2 young kids trailing behind them, one of them dragging an overstuffed backpack and refusing all offers of help with the absolute conviction of a child who has decided this is a matter of principle. Maya was at the front of the house when they came in. She crossed the lobby to meet them before they reached the desk, introduced herself by name, and asked how she could help make their stay easy. She did not look at their luggage or their shoes. She looked at them, at the tired eyes and the stubborn kid, and she smiled the way people smile when they genuinely mean it. Within 2 minutes, the parents' shoulders had come down. Within 5, even the kid with the backpack had let someone take it from him. In the far corner of the lobby, Marcus stood with Zoe beside him. He had come for a scheduled visit this time, wearing a jacket instead of a hoodie, though Zoe had still brought Captain. They had been there for 10 minutes, and he had not announced himself to the floor yet because he wanted to see this first, just the ordinary work of the place, the everyday version of the thing he had spent his life trying to build. Zoe watched Maya lead the family toward the desk, watched the kids light up when Maya said something that made them laugh. Then she looked up at her father. "Is that what it's supposed to look like?" she asked. Marcus watched the family settle in, watched the tired parents exhale, watched the kid with the backpack finally let it go. "Yeah," he said, "that's exactly what it's supposed to look like." Zoe considered this with the quiet thoroughness she brought to most things. Then she nodded, once tucked Captain under her arm, and reached up to take her father's hand. Marcus held it, and they stood there together in the corner of the lobby he had built, watching the place finally become what he had always meant it to be. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity before they prove anything, before they show you what they have, before you decide whether they belong. That's not just good business. That's just what's right. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and stick around. We tell more stories like this one every week.